She walked aboard the aircraft and took her seat in first class, eyes cast down to avoid the stares. Whispers turned to open complaints, then humiliation, as flight attendants forced her to leave. Laughter followed her down the aisle as she adjusted her bag, causing her jacket to ride up just enough. The unmistakable Navy SEAL insignia tattoo across her back became visible for all to see. The cabin fell silent. When the pilot emerged and spotted the tattoo, his face drained of color. He recognized exactly who she was. Athalia Desjardins moved through San Diego International Airport like a shadow, efficient, unnoticed, and preferring it that way. 15 years in naval special warfare had taught her to blend into any environment. Though today she wasn't trying to disappear, she was simply being herself. A woman in worn jeans and a leather jacket that had seen better days, hair pulled back in a practical bun, eyes constantly scanning her surroundings from habit. The first-class boarding call for Flight 237 to Washington, D.C., echoed through the terminal. Athalia shouldered her weathered duffel bag, the same one that had accompanied her to 4 continents, and joined the line, boarding pass in hand. The businessman ahead of her, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, gave her a sidelong glance before returning to his phone conversation about quarterly projections. She ignored him. The message from her brother burned in her mind. Dad's condition worsened. Doctor says days, not weeks, please hurry. After 15 years of answering every call except the ones from home, she was finally going back. Perhaps too late. The gate agent barely glanced at her boarding pass, focused more on the suited passengers ahead and behind. Athalia strode down the jet bridge with the efficient gait of someone who never wasted movement. As she stepped aboard, the lead flight attendant's smile faltered momentarily as she looked at Athalia's casual attire, then recovered with professional quickness. "Welcome aboard," she said, tone neutral. "First class is to your right." Athalia found her seat in first class, 1C aisle, and stowed her bag efficiently. Around her, business people and well-heeled travelers settled in with practiced entitlement. Across the aisle, Marcus Langley, a man in his mid-50s, with the confident posture of someone who expected the world to bend to his preferences, frowned at her arrival. "Excuse me," she said quietly, needing to access her seat. Marcus made a show of sighing and shifting his legs, not quite standing. "I think you might be in the wrong section," he said, just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Athalia simply showed her boarding pass. 1C. She settled into her seat, keeping her movements contained, as she'd learned to do in spaces where detection meant death. Her phone vibrated. Another text from her brother. "Where are you? He's asking for you." The announcement came. A weather system had delayed their departure 40 minutes, possibly longer. Mina Parrish, a flight attendant with a practiced smile, approached, offering pre-flight beverages. "Just water, please," Athalia said. "Champagne," Marcus countered loudly, then added to the passengers around him. "May as well enjoy the perks we pay for, right?" Several passengers laughed. Athalia simply looked out the window, where storm clouds gathered on the horizon. She'd weathered worse than this, both literally and figuratively. In the row behind her, 2 women in designer clothing spoke in voices meant to be overheard. "Standards really have slipped," one said. "I remember when people dressed properly for first class." "Maybe she won an upgrade," the other replied with a chuckle. "Those online contests, you know." Athalia didn't react. She'd been through hostage extractions in Taliban territory. Airline passenger commentary barely registered as conflict. Still, a familiar tension worked its way up her spine, the hypervigilance that never fully left, even years after leaving active field operations. As time passed and the delay stretched, the atmosphere in first class grew increasingly tense. Marcus became the unofficial spokesperson for passenger discontent. making increasingly loud comments about incompetence and wasted premium fees. Lucian Thorne, a younger executive 2 rows ahead, kept turning back to join the commiseration. "At these prices, they should at least keep us informed," he said, shooting a glance at Athalia, as if she were somehow responsible for the declining standards he perceived. When Mina returned with Dorinda Candish, the head flight attendant, Athalia sensed trouble before they reached her. "Miss Desjardins," Dorinda spoke with professional detachment. "I'm afraid there's been a booking error. We need to relocate you to economy class." Athalia looked at her boarding pass, then back at Dorinda. "This says 1C. "Yes, but our manifest shows," Dorinda began. Marcus interrupted. "Some standards still exist." Dorinda lowered her voice. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but we need this seat for another passenger. We can offer you credit toward a future flight." Around her, Athalia noted the satisfied smirks. She'd faced enemy fire with less hostility than these expressions. For a moment, she considered arguing. She had every right to be there, but years of discipline made her choose the path of least resistance. "Fine," she said quietly, gathering her bag. As she stood, Marcus muttered just loud enough. "Some people just don't belong up here. You can always tell." Lucian Thorne actually took a photo of her as she moved past, thumbs working on his screen. Guess the airline's upgrading anyone these days. Hash flight fails. The walk of shame through the premium cabin felt longer than any mission extraction. Athalia kept her eyes forward, her face impassive. In economy class, Bennett Harlow, another flight attendant, led her through packed rows. "We're completely full due to the weather cancellations," he explained nervously. "We're trying to find you a seat." Athalia stood in the crowded aisle holding her duffel as passengers stared. Military training had prepared her for many things, but the particular sting of public humiliation wasn't in any manual. She shifted her bag to her other shoulder, causing her jacket to ride up slightly at the back. A young woman seated nearby caught sight of something and straightened, eyes widening slightly. But Athalia adjusted her jacket quickly, and the moment passed. "I can stand in the back until you find something," Athalia offered to Bennett, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "We're required to have all passengers seated for takeoff," he explained, glancing back toward first class. "There seems to be confusion about the booking." Behind them, a few economy passengers had overheard the situation. An older woman huffed. "Must be nice to have them scrambling to make you comfortable." Athalia caught Bennett's eye. "I'll wait by the rear galley. Just tell me when you have a seat." As she moved toward the back, she passed a row where a small child was looking at her with curiosity rather than judgment. The girl, perhaps 7 or 8, leaned toward her mother and whispered something. The mother glanced up at Athalia, then back to her daughter, shaking her head. "No, honey. She's not a soldier. Just a lady who got downgraded." Athalia almost smiled at the irony. Just a lady who had spent 6 months embedded with a forward combat team in Helmand Province. Just a lady who had coordinated the extraction of 3 high-value intelligence assets from a region so classified it didn't appear on official deployment records. Just a lady who had carried a wounded teammate across 3 kilometers of hostile territory when air support was compromised. But that was the point, wasn't it? The whole purpose of her career had been to be invisible, to do what needed doing without recognition or acclaim, to serve silently at the rear galley. She set down her bag and rolled her neck to release tension. The delay in reaching her father gnawed at her. If she missed these final days after 15 years of choosing duty over family, what would that make her? The aircraft intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Eldon Vantage. I apologize for the continued delay. Air traffic control advises we should receive clearance within the next 15 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare for a pre-departure check." Athalia noticed Bennett speaking with another crew member, both occasionally glancing in her direction. The problem of where to seat her remained unresolved. The cabin door had been closed for some time now. Outside, the weather was deteriorating. Through the small galley window, she could see ground crews working hastily, racing against the approaching storm. Captain Eldon Vantage had piloted commercial aircraft for 15 years after his military service. Routine was his religion: pre-flight checks, crew briefings, and a personal walkthrough of the cabin before takeoff. The weather delay had disrupted his schedule, but not his habits. He emerged from the cockpit, adjusting his uniform cap as he stepped into the first-class cabin. Several passengers immediately raised concerns about the delay, which he acknowledged with professional courtesy. As he continued his walkthrough, he noticed an empty seat in first class, 1C, despite the full passenger manifest. "Is there a passenger missing?" he asked Dorinda, who had appeared at his side. "No, Captain. There was a booking confusion. We relocated a passenger to economy." Vantage frowned slightly. "In the middle of a full flight with weather delays?" "The passenger was accommodating," Dorinda assured him. He nodded and continued his walk through the cabin, his eyes noting details as they always did, a habit from military days when overlooking small anomalies could be fatal. As he reached the transition point between cabin classes, he spotted the passenger in question, a woman standing quietly by the rear galley, her duffel at her feet. Something about her posture caught his attention. The way she stood with her back to the wall, eyes tracking movement, feet positioned for balance. She shifted position slightly as a flight attendant passed, and her jacket rode up at the back, revealing the edge of an intricate tattoo. The captain's step faltered as he caught sight of the unmistakable design. The trident of the Navy SEALs, with additional markings that only someone with specific military knowledge would recognize. The captain froze mid-stride, his professional demeanor momentarily forgotten. He stared at the woman, processing what he was seeing, not just the tattoo itself, but on whom it was displayed. Years of training and protocol fell away as recognition dawned. He knew that face from intelligence briefings and classified mission summaries. He knew what that particular trident configuration, with those specific additional markings, signified. "Lieutenant Commander Desjardins," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then with more certainty, "Silver Star recipient, Helmand Province." The woman turned, her eyes meeting his, soldier's eyes that had seen too much, recognized another who understood. For a moment, neither spoke. The ambient noise of the aircraft faded away as something passed between them, a recognition that transcended the artificial hierarchy of the aircraft cabin. Captain Vantage straightened to his full height and offered a crisp, formal salute that would have made his drill instructor proud. "Ma'am," he said clearly, "I served with the 5th Fleet Support during Operation Neptune Spear. Your team's actions saved my brother's unit." The nearby passengers who had been watching the downgraded passenger situation unfold now stared in confusion. Several economy-class passengers who had been military themselves recognized the significance of the captain's salute and posture. Athalia gave a small nod of acknowledgement, her expression unchanged, but her eyes conveying silent understanding. The captain turned to Bennett. "Lieutenant Commander Desjardins will be returning to her assigned first-class seat immediately." The gesture silenced the entire section of the plane. Passengers who had been engrossed in devices or conversations suddenly found themselves witnesses to something they didn't understand. The silence spread like ripples in a pend from the galley, where Captain Vantage stood at attention, through economy, and forward to the first-class cabin, where Marcus Langley and others craned their necks to see what was happening. "There's been a mistake," Captain Vantage said firmly to Bennett, "and we're correcting it now." Bennett looked from the captain to Athalia, confusion clear on his face. Sir, this passenger is Lieutenant Commander Desjardins. She will be seated in her assigned first-class seat, immediately. Dorinda had appeared behind the captain, her professional composure momentarily slipping. Captain, there's been a booking issue that required— There's been a mistake, he corrected, turning to face her with an authority that brooked no argument. One that reflects poorly on our airline and on our appreciation for those who serve. Lieutenant Commander Desjardins will return to her assigned seat in first class. That is not a request. Athalia retrieved her duffel bag, her movements still economical and precise. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The captain's recognition had done what 15 years of decorated service never had, made visible what she had spent a career keeping invisible. As they moved forward through the aircraft, passengers watched with newfound interest. The whispers began spreading from person to person. Seal. But she's— Neptune's spear was the silver star for valor. A young man in economy who wore a Marine Corps t-shirt stood as she passed, offering his own respectful nod. Captain Vantage escorted Athalia personally, walking slightly behind her right shoulder in a position of respect. As they reached the first-class cabin, Marcus Langley shrank visibly in his seat. The smirk had vanished, replaced by the uncomfortable look of a man realizing he'd made a grave miscalculation. Lucian Thorne was still holding his phone, but now seemed uncertain whether to take another photo or hide the device entirely. Seat 1C, the captain announced, gesturing to Athalia's original seat, which remained empty. The passenger who had supposedly needed it was nowhere to be seen. Athalia stored her bag and sat down without fanfare. Captain Vantage remained standing in the aisle, addressing the first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to have Lieutenant Commander Desjardins aboard today. She's one of only 3 women ever to complete BUDS training and serve with SEAL Team 6. Some of her missions remain classified, but I can tell you that many of us came home to our families because of officers like her. The captain's words settled over the cabin like a physical weight. Passengers who had been so quick to judge now stared with new eyes. Some embarrassed, others curious, a few openly admiring. We'll be taking off shortly, the captain concluded. I trust everyone will have a comfortable flight. His eyes briefly met Marcus Langley's, the message unmistakable. As Captain Vantage returned to the cockpit, Mina approached with a fresh glass of water, her hands trembling slightly. I'm so sorry, Commander, she said quietly. If I had known— You couldn't have known, Athalia replied simply. That's rather the point. Mina hesitated, then continued. My cousin was stationed in Kandahar. He told stories about a female SEAL who extracted a surrounded unit when no one else would attempt the rescue. Was that? Athalia gave a small nod, but deflected. I just did the job I was trained to do. Across the aisle, Marcus cleared his throat. I apologize for my earlier comments. I had no idea. Athalia cut him off with a simple statement. You judged what you saw. Most people do. The words hung in the air between them, neither accusation nor absolution, merely observation. Lucian Thorne leaned forward from his seat. Commander, I want to apologize for the photo. I've deleted it, of course. Too late for that, I think, Athalia said, nodding toward a woman several rows back who was clearly typing on her phone, occasionally glancing up at her. The news would spread. It always did. After years of operating in shadows, of being a ghost that governments could officially deny existed, she would become briefly visible. Perhaps that was fitting for her final mission, returning home. In the row beside her, an elderly man in a worn Veterans Affairs cap caught her eye and offered a respectful nod of acknowledgement, one soldier to another. His weathered hands bore the distinctive scars of someone who had seen combat up close. Korea, he said simply, no other introduction needed. Thank you for your service, Athalia replied, the words automatic but sincere. He chuckled softly. Been hearing that a lot lately. Wasn't always that way. When we came home, nobody wanted to know. Athalia nodded in understanding. Different wars, different welcomes, but some things remained constant. The weight carried, the things that couldn't be explained to those who hadn't been there. Your father? The older veteran asked. Athalia looked at him in surprise. The reason you're traveling, he clarified. Saw you check your phone. Had that look. Navy captain, she confirmed. Cancer. They're saying days, not weeks. The man nodded, saying nothing more, but his eyes conveyed understanding. Some connections required no words. As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, Athalia's phone connected to the aircraft Wi-Fi. Another text from her brother appeared. They say he's hanging on by sheer willpower. He keeps saying, he's waiting for you. She closed her eyes as the engines roared to life. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel tired, not the physical fatigue of training or operations, but the bone-deep weariness of holding herself apart for so long, of being always vigilant, always controlled, always the person others looked to for strength. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, pressing her back into the seat. As they lifted into the gray San Diego sky, Athalia felt a sense of transition, more profound than the physical journey. For 15 years, she had lived between worlds, operating in spaces most people never knew existed, making decisions that would never be recorded in history books. Now, she was going home to a father who had set her on this path, who had understood the cost because he had paid it himself over 40 years of service. Captain Franklin Desjardins had never pushed her toward military service, had in fact initially discouraged it when she expressed interest in the academy. He had seen too much, lost too many. But when she persisted, when she demonstrated the same unyielding determination that had defined his own career, he had become her fiercest advocate. If you're going to serve, he told her at her commissioning, then serve with everything you have. Half measures get people killed. She had taken that advice to heart, pursuing the most demanding path available. When the SEALs finally opened buds to women on a trial basis, she had been among the first to apply, and the only woman in her class to complete the training. What followed was a career spent proving herself repeatedly, not just as a woman in special operations, but as an operator who could be trusted with the most sensitive missions. The aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude. Around her, the atmosphere in first class had transformed. The earlier hostility had given way to a strange mix of deference and curiosity. Several passengers were clearly discussing her, though they tried to be discreet. Dorinda approached, her professional demeanor firmly back in place, but now tinged with something like awe. Commander, Captain Vantage asked me to convey his personal apologies for the misunderstanding. The airline will be reaching out formally to make amends. That's not necessary, Athalia said. Nevertheless, Dorinda insisted, is there anything you need for the flight? Athalia shook her head. Water and quiet were all she required. As Dorinda moved away, Athalia noticed the young girl from economy peeking around the cabin divider, staring at her with unconcealed curiosity. Their eyes met, and instead of retreating, the girl gave a shy wave. Despite herself, Athalia smiled and returned the gesture. The girl's mother appeared, apologizing wordlessly as she guided her daughter back to their seat, but not before the girl whispered loudly, "See, Mom, I told you she was a soldier." The mother's eyes widened as she looked back at Athalia, having clearly heard the commotion about the captain's recognition. She mouthed, "Thank you," before disappearing back into economy. Mina returned with a fresh snack basket, offering it first to Athalia. "The captain mentioned you've been with SEAL Team 6. My brother serves too, Army Rangers. He's deployed right now. Athalia selected a protein bar. Rangers are solid. What's his station? He can't say exactly. Somewhere in Africa. Athalia nodded. She knew exactly which operations were running in Africa, which units were deployed where, but maintained the expected discretion. Tell him Trident sends respect when you speak to him next. Mina's eyes lit up. I will. He'll be thrilled. As the flight progressed, Athalia attempted to maintain her privacy, but word had spread throughout the aircraft. Passengers found excuses to walk past her seat. A few approached directly to express gratitude or share connections to military service. She received each interaction with the same quiet dignity, neither encouraging nor rebuffing the attention. This visibility was unfamiliar territory, more uncomfortable in some ways than actual combat zones had been. Marcus Langley had not spoken again, but she could feel his occasional glances. About halfway through the flight, he stood and moved to the lavatory at the front of the cabin. On his return, he paused beside her seat. "Commander, I want to," he began. "It's forgotten," she said, hoping to end the conversation quickly. He hesitated, then continued anyway. "My son wanted to enlist after high school. I talked him out of it. Thought he was destined for better things. Business school, following my path." He paused. "I've never told anyone this, but I think I was wrong. He's never found his purpose, never had that look in his eyes, the one you have, the one that says you know exactly why you're here." Before Athalia could respond, the aircraft intercom activated. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Vantage. We've been cleared for an expedited approach into Dulles International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Marcus nodded respectfully and returned to his seat. As the plane began its descent, Athalia found herself wondering what awaited her in Washington beyond her father's hospital room. She had accumulated leave time that she'd never used, commendations she'd never displayed, a life outside of service that she'd never fully developed. The wheels touched down on the Dulles runway with a gentle bump. As the aircraft taxied toward the terminal, Captain Vantage's voice came over the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Dulles International Airport. Local time is 4:47 p.m. Weather is clear, temperature 62 degrees. Please remain seated until we reach the gate, and the fasten seatbelt sign has been turned off." There was a brief pause. Then he continued. "On behalf of the entire crew, I want to express our deepest gratitude to those who serve our nation, especially those like Lieutenant Commander Desjardins, who ask for no recognition, but deserve our highest respect. It has been our honor to bring you home, Commander." The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause. Athalia stared straight ahead, her expression neutral, despite the emotion threatening to break through her carefully maintained composure. As the plane reached the gate and the seatbelt sign was turned off, passengers stood and began collecting their belongings. Contrary to the usual rush, however, something remarkable happened. The first-class passengers, including Marcus Langley and Lucian Thorne, remained seated, waiting. Dorinda approached Athalia. "Commander, whenever you're ready." Athalia understood. They were waiting for her to deplane first, a small gesture of respect. It was unnecessary, even uncomfortable, but she recognized the meaning behind it. She collected her duffel bag and moved toward the exit. As she passed through first class, economy, and finally reached the aircraft door, she found Captain Vantage waiting, standing at attention. "Thank you for your service, Commander," he said formally, "and Godspeed with your father." Athalia nodded, words momentarily beyond her. Then, with the discipline that had carried her through the most difficult missions of her career, she straightened her shoulders and stepped off the plane, heading toward the one mission for which all her training had left her unprepared. saying goodbye. The Washington, D.C. hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. Athalia moved through it with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown her entire career, though her heart pounded with an emotion no training had prepared her for. Outside room 437, her brother Kieran waited, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "You made it," he said, embracing her with the desperate strength of someone clinging to their last lifeline. "How is he?" she asked, holding on. "Waiting for you, I think." Captain Franklin Desjardins lay amid white sheets that matched his pallor, monitors beeping in rhythm with his weakening heart. 40 years in the Navy had made him formidable. Cancer had made him mortal. His eyes fluttered open as Athalia approached, recognition bringing a smile to his gaunt face. "My girl," he whispered, "always on time when it matters." She took his hand, the same hand that had once pinned captain's bars on his collar, that had taught her to sail when she was 8, that had signed her academy recommendation with fierce pride. "I'm sorry it took so long," she said. He shook his head faintly. "You were where you needed to be." As afternoon faded into evening, Athalia didn't leave his side. They spoke little. They'd never been a family of many words, but in the silence was everything that mattered. Her father drifted in and out of consciousness. During one lucid moment, he asked, "Your team?" "All good," she assured him. "Rodriguez made Master Chief. Chen got married, if you can believe it. And Winters finally beat my obstacle course record." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Had to happen someday. A nurse entered with the evening medication and a tablet in hand. "Miss Desjardins, there are some people downstairs asking about you. Something about a flight yesterday." She showed Athalia the screen. A news article headline read, "Unsung Hero. Decorated SEAL recognized mid-flight." Below was an image taken by a passenger, Captain Vantage, saluting her in the aisle of Flight 237. The story had spread overnight. Dozens of military personnel, active and retired, had gathered in the hospital lobby, in quiet solidarity. Her father's eyes found the tablet screen. "What's this?" She explained the flight incident briefly, downplaying it as she always did with her accomplishments. A weak chuckle escaped him. Always carrying the weight without complaint. Her phone buzzed with a message from Captain Vantage. "Hope you made it in time. Your father served with distinction. So did you. The airline CEO would like to speak with you when appropriate." Her father squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "The best serve quietly," he managed. "But sometimes, the quiet ones need to be heard." Outside, the corridor had filled with uniforms, a silent honor guard forming spontaneously as word spread of Captain Desjardins' condition. When Athalia stepped out briefly for coffee, they stood at attention, offering silent nods of respect. Captain Vantage was among them. "We thought you shouldn't be alone," he said simply. "Not now." Athalia was caught off guard by the gesture. Throughout her career, she had operated with the understanding that her service would remain largely invisible, her achievements classified, her sacrifices known only to those with the highest clearances. Yet here was visible proof that the bonds formed in service transcended the official boundaries of classified operations and military branches. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. When she returned to her father's room, his eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. Kieran looked up with weary resignation. "The doctor says it could be hours or days. There's no way to know." Athalia nodded, taking her position at her father's side once more. "You should get some rest," Kieran said. "I can watch." "I'll stay," Athalia replied, the same answer she'd given countless times during operations when others offered to take her watch. Through the night, they maintained their vigil. Occasionally, medical staff entered to check vitals or adjust medication, moving with the quiet efficiency of those accustomed to the threshold between life and death. Near dawn, Franklin Desjardins' eyes opened with unexpected clarity. He looked at Athalia with recognition and purpose. "The box," he whispered. "In my desk, third drawer." Kieran frowned. "Dad, what box?" But Franklin's eyes remained fixed on Athalia. She understood. There were things between them, soldier to soldier, that Kieran could not share. "I'll find it," she promised. Her father nodded, satisfied. "Proud," he managed, the word carrying the weight of a lifetime. So proud. Before the sun rose, Franklin Desjardins took his final breath, his daughter's hand in his. Outside his window, the first hints of sunrise illuminated the Washington Monument in the distance, a pillar of strength standing silent watch over the Capitol. The days that followed passed in a blur of arrangements and notifications. The news of Captain Desjardins' passing spread quickly through military circles, his distinguished career earning him honors that he had never sought but rightfully deserved. Athalia handled the details with the same precision she brought to operations, efficient and thorough, allowing the structure of tasks to hold her together when emotion threatened to overwhelm. In her father's study, she found the box he had mentioned, a simple wooden case with a Navy emblem carved into the lid. Inside were items he had kept from his own career: commendation letters, a few medals he hadn't displayed, and photographs from deployments long past. Among them, Athalia found a letter addressed to her, sealed and dated nearly 10 years earlier. She opened it with careful hands. "My dearest Athalia, if you're reading this, I've made my final deployment. Don't grieve too long. You and I both know that's not what sailors do. I've watched your career from afar, gleaning what little information security clearances would allow. What I know makes me prouder than I can express. What I don't know, I can imagine. The path you chose is harder than most will ever understand. The weight you carry, invisible to civilian eyes. I recognize that weight because I carried it too, though never as far or as alone as you have. When you were born, I prayed you would find a gentler path. When you chose to follow mine instead, I feared for you. When you surpassed me, I stood in awe. Remember this: our greatest service is not measured in medals or missions, but in the moments we choose duty over comfort, others over self. By that measure, you are the finest officer I have ever known. The world may never know your full story, but I do. And I could ask for no greater legacy than the knowledge that my daughter stands on the wall, keeping watch while others sleep in peace. Until we meet in calmer waters, Dad." The letter blurred as Athalia fought back the tears she had controlled for so long. She folded it carefully, returning it to the box, along with the other treasures of her father's life. The funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew hundreds, a testament to the lives Franklin Desjardins had touched over his long career. Athalia stood straight-backed in her dress uniform, the medals she rarely wore catching the afternoon sunlight. Beside her, Kieran represented the civilian half of their family, the life that had continued while father and daughter served far from home. As the honor guard folded the flag with precise, reverent movements, Athalia found herself scanning the gathered crowd. Many faces she recognized from her father's career. Others were strangers, connected by the invisible threads that bound military families together across generations and branches of service. Near the back, she spotted Captain Vantage in his airline uniform, standing at respectful attention. Behind him, to her surprise, were several faces from Flight 237, including Marcus Langley. They had come to pay respects to a man they had never met because of a daughter they had almost dismissed. The folded flag was presented to Athalia with solemn ceremony, on behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation. She received it with steady hands, though her heart felt anything but steady. After the ceremony, a steady stream of mourners offered condolences and shared memories. Kieran handled most of the interactions, understanding that his sister's composure was maintained through careful distance. A naval officer in dress uniform approached, his insignia marking him as an admiral. "Commander Desjardins," he said formally, "your father was one of the finest officers I ever served with. The Navy has lost a legend." "Thank you, Admiral," Athalia replied. He lowered his voice. "When you're ready to return to duty, there's a place for you at Naval Special Warfare Command. Your expertise is invaluable, especially in the new training programs." Athalia nodded noncommittally. She hadn't thought beyond this day, beyond fulfilling her final duty to her father. As the crowd began to disperse, Captain Vantage approached. "Commander," he said, extending his hand, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," she assured him. "Thank you for coming." "Your father was highly regarded in the service," he said. "Even those of us in other branches knew the name Desjardins." Athalia nodded. "He never sought recognition." "The best never do," Vantage replied. Then, with slight hesitation, he added, "There's someone who would like to speak with you, if you're willing." He gestured toward Marcus Langley, who stood uncertainly at a respectful distance. Athalia considered for a moment, then nodded. Marcus approached with the humility of a man who had reconsidered many things. "Commander Desjardins, I wanted to express my condolences for your loss," he said, "and to apologize again for my behavior on the flight." "As I said then, it's forgotten," Athalia replied. "Maybe it shouldn't be," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe it's something I needed to remember." He paused. "My son enlisted yesterday. Army." After I told him about what happened on our flight, Athalia looked at him with new interest. "Why?" "He said he wanted to be part of something that mattered," Marcus replied. "Something bigger than quarterly reports and stock options. I think he's right." As they spoke, a young female Navy cadet approached hesitantly. She stood at a respectful distance until Athalia acknowledged her. "Commander Desjardins, I'm Cadet Embry Calloway," she said, coming to attention. "I just wanted to say your service record, what's declassified anyway, has been an inspiration." Athalia studied her, saw the determination, the fire, the same spark that had driven her past every barrier. "At ease, cadet," she said. "What's your specialization?" "I've applied to the BUDS preparatory program," Embry replied, standing a little straighter. "They told me women couldn't make it through. That's why I applied." Something shifted in Athalia's expression, a rare glimpse of the passion that drove her beneath the disciplined exterior. "Remember this, Calloway," she said. "The uniform, the medals, the recognition. None of that makes you who you are. It's who you are that gives meaning to everything else." Embry nodded, eyes bright with determination. "Yes, ma'am." As the cadet walked away, Kieran joined his sister. "Dad would have liked her," he said. "He would have pushed her twice as hard as any male cadet," Athalia replied with a small smile. "Like he did with you." She nodded, gazing at the rows of identical white markers stretching into the distance. He understood what it costs and what it's worth. In the days that followed, Athalia remained in Washington, sorting through her father's affairs and considering her next steps. The leave time she had accumulated over years of refusing breaks stretched ahead of her, an unfamiliar freedom. One morning, she received a call from an unknown number. "Commander Desjardins, This is Grace Holloway, CEO of Atlantic Airways. I wanted to personally apologize for your experience on our flight. That's not necessary, Athalia began. I disagree, the CEO replied firmly. What happened reflects poorly on our company values and our commitment to those who serve. Captain Vantage has brought the incident to my attention, and we're implementing new training for our staff as a result. After the call, Athalia sat in her father's study, surrounded by the remnants of his life. On his desk stood a photograph of her commissioning ceremony, father and daughter, in matching naval uniforms, pride evident in his stance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kieran. Want to grab lunch? Mom's in town and asking about you. The relationship with her mother had always been complicated. Elizabeth Desjardins had divorced Franklin when the children were teenagers, unable to endure the constant deployments and the emotional distance that came with them. She had remarried, built a new life away from the military culture that had defined their family for so long. I'll be there, Athalia replied. As she prepared to leave, her gaze fell on her father's letter once more. The world may never know your full story, but I do. Perhaps that had been enough once. Perhaps it still could be. But something had shifted on that flight, in that moment when Captain Vantage had recognized not just her service, but her humanity. The invisible weight she had carried for so long had been, if not lifted, then at least acknowledged. In that acknowledgement lay a kind of freedom she hadn't known she needed. Outside, the spring sun warmed Washington streets. Cherry blossoms drifted on the breeze, their delicate beauty a reminder of how fleeting life could be. Athalia walked with her characteristic purpose, but allowed herself to notice the beauty around her in a way that operational awareness had never permitted. At the restaurant, she saw her mother and brother waiting, Elizabeth's face showing the nervous anticipation of someone reconnecting after a long absence. Athalia straightened her shoulders and moved forward toward a different kind of courage than any she had needed on the battlefield. In the heart-wrenching tale of Athalia Desjardins, a decorated Navy SEAL who endured judgment and humiliation on a flight simply because her appearance didn't match the polished facade of first-class privilege, we uncover a profound life lesson. Never judge a book by its cover, for beneath unassuming exteriors often lie stories of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Athalia, clad in worn jeans and a weathered jacket, was dismissed as out of place by entitled passengers like Marcus Langley, who mocked her without knowing she had braved Taliban territories, extracted hostages under fire, and carried wounded comrades across hostile lands, all while keeping her valor hidden in the shadows of classified missions. Her quiet dignity in the face of ridicule, only to be revealed as a Silver Star recipient when her SEAL Trident tattoo caught the pilot's eye, serves as a poignant reminder that true heroes rarely seek the spotlight. They serve silently, bearing invisible weights that allow the rest of us to live in peace, much like Athalia's father, a Navy captain whose final days were marked by pride in his daughter's unspoken legacy. This story stirs deep emotions, the sting of injustice, the warmth of redemption, and the ache of unrecognized sacrifice, urging us to pause before passing judgment, to look beyond surface-level assumptions, and to honor the quiet warriors among us. In a world quick to criticize based on appearances, Athalia's journey teaches us empathy, humility, and gratitude. It challenges us to reflect on our own biases and to celebrate the unsung acts of bravery that shape our society. Imagine the lives touched by such hidden strength. Perhaps even someone you know carries a similar burden. If this emotional narrative resonates with you, evoking tears or inspiration, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever misjudged someone only to discover their incredible story? Let's discuss and spread this message of respect. And if you want more heart-stirring stories that honor everyday heroes, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We promise to deliver tales that move your soul and open your eyes. Your support means the world.